Order, shot fire, officer down, shot fire, officer down. Got a city officer down, shot fire.
223, be advised, we have a visual on enemy paratroopers in grid Navy uniforms.
Welcome to the Resilient Warrior Nation, a podcast dedicated to inspiring hope and healing for first responders, military veterans, and anyone facing PTSD and trauma. Hey guys, welcome to another podcast episode of the Resilient Warrior Nation. I'm your host, Mike Morgan, and as I always do, I like to explain why I'm wearing this shirt. This is not a proclamation. Unafraid is the name of a company owned by a man named Eddie Penny. He's a former Navy SEAL, and as I sat down to watch a Sean Ryan podcast episode in the spring of 2023, in which Eddie was a guest, I had no idea that the trajectory of my life was about to be changed. During the course of that episode, Eddie was recounting the story of the Extortion 17 incident in which a Chinook was shot down in Afghanistan by insurgents, killing all 38 aboard, including 17 SEALs. It was the largest loss of community in one event ever, and included in the dead was Jason Workman, Eddie's best friend. And as Eddie told the story, he was upset, rightly so. I myself am a medically retired 30-year police officer veteran, and as Eddie was telling that story, I simultaneously began thinking about a call that I had buried 5 years before about a 2-year-old found floating in a pool, a little girl named Dana Sikorsky, beautiful little girl. It was literally the one call in my 30-year career that I actually started to cry, but I stopped myself, told myself, fucking pussy, stop crying, because men don't cry, as we know. Would have been the best cathartic thing I could have done at the time, but we don't do that. So as I'm listening to Eddie tell his story and thinking about Dana, I literally started crying like a baby. There's no other way to put it. At this time, I was retired for approximately a year, and after retiring, I started experiencing feelings of anger, depression, rage, just general unhappiness. Pretty self-aware, but I could not figure out the origination of these feelings. And as this happened, watching this podcast episode, I kind of put two and two together rather quickly and realized that I suffered some sort of PTSD in my career. I always mistakenly believed that you had to see your brother or sister next to you get killed to do so, but mine was caused from being inside the most devastatingly intimate moments of other people's lives over and over and over. So I realized I needed help. I didn't want to live with this the rest of my life. I didn't want to be this ornery guy that hated everyone and everything. Just wasn't sure how I was going to go about it. I didn't think traditional therapy was going to do it for me. I think I'd talk to some man or woman sitting behind a desk, telling them things I've done and seen, and they'd be able to help. So I had seen prior to this podcast episode and afterwards, mostly special force operators talking about coming back from war, self-professed broken men, and their consequent healing journey with psychedelics. So I really started paying attention, started doing research, realized ayahuasca was calling me, and my wife and myself went to a facility in Orlando, Florida, shortly after moving to Florida in March of 2024, March 1st to be exact. During the course of that weekend, I literally changed my entire life. As I always say, I was reborn in a non-religious sense. And as I was coming out of that first journey, and let me preface this by saying 2 former friends and co-workers from my Suffolk County job had committed suicide 3 weeks before, a week apart. Sergeant had killed himself in a precinct locker room. The universe and I was speaking. I know it sounds weird, but the universe told me that I was healed. It's not linear. I still go through stuff every day like everyone else, but essentially my PTSD was healed, and my life's pursuit was to go forth, help other first responders and vets heal theirs. I said okay out loud, having no idea how I was going to implement that. But one thing I decided to do was to create a podcast and do for others what Sean Ryan did for me. And in that, I bring on mostly special force and conventional forces, first responders who talk about their stories, the highest of highs, lowest of lows, ordinary people who've done extraordinary things with their lives, in the hopes that you men and women who are going through it will identify with them, will gain some inspiration and hope, and know that you too can heal. So in that vein, I'm very excited to introduce my next guest, Drew Barnett. Drew was born in Canada and grew up in Mississippi. He attended Mississippi, I always have to do this, MISSISSIPPI State University, earning a bachelor's degree in mathematics. Upon graduation, he attended Aviation Officer Candidate School and received his commission in the U.S. Navy in 1992. Drew spent his first years of service in naval aviation and finished his service as military liaison to the U.S. intelligence community in the Washington, D.C. area. Drew then joined the FBI in 2000. In 2005, Drew was selected to deploy with Special Operations Forces in Afghanistan. While serving with the U.S. Navy SEALs, Drew was severely injured in a roadside accident. The accident resulted in traumatic brain injury and significant lacerations to the left side of Drew's head. The impact of the crash forced his M4 carbine weapon through his left underarm into his shoulder, permanently and completely destroying all 4 of his left shoulder rotator cuffs and 1 of his left bicep muscles. Drew's leg was severely damaged as a piece of the HUMVEE roof pierced completely through his left quadriceps muscle, and his lower left leg was crushed with multiple compound fractures. Drew was medically evacuated to Walter Reed Medical Center, and doctors told him he would never be able to run again or regain the use of his left arm. Drew was encouraged to medically retire from the FBI. Drew did not heed the doctor's advice and instead set goals for himself and pursued extensive and painful rehabilitation, hundreds of doctor visits, and underwent numerous surgeries. 13 months later, Drew deployed back to Afghanistan as part of his Special Operations Unit. In 2008, Drew was diagnosed with complications associated with the TBI as a result from his 2005 accident. Today, he swims and mountain bikes to stay physically and mentally fit. Drew retired approximately 4 years ago from the FBI. He and his wife, Wendy, have an adorable 2-year-old son. Drew, unbelievably excited to have you on the show. What a career, what a story.
Thank you very much. And so I realized my bio was old, so my little guy's 11 now. So it's now we're able to do some fun hiking, and that's on me. But thank you for that introduction.
Absolutely, 11. He's going to be out of the house in like 7 more years. So
I'm dreading that every day. If I waited so late to get married and have kids, that I don't want that to happen anytime soon.
It sounds like you guys enjoy your time together, so that's all that counts. The quality. So, listen, that's some story. Let's get to everyone kind of know you, get to know a little bit about you, where you grew up, how you grew up, family. So we're starting in Canada.
Yeah, in Canada. So I was born in Canada because my folks were poor, and they could go into Canada and birth me for free since they have socialized medicine. So my father and mother, I mean, almost like the anchor baby that we hear from Mexico. But,
yeah.
So they could go over there and birth me for free, and as such, it just caused problems for my entire career. Every time I was getting a TSSCI or any kind of other background, being born in a foreign country. But my father was a logger in the northwest, Washington, Oregon. So then we moved to Oregon until I was in the first grade, and then when the summer between my first and second grade, we moved to Mississippi, which is where I grew up, graduated high school, and that's pretty much home since.
Okay. And then, so what did you give? Did he give up logging? I guess he gave up logging to go to Mississippi.
He did. So he was a laborer. So he was a welder, mechanic, and so he just did laborer kind of work. So, it was tough growing up, but he built our house, himself. So our entire house. So, we might have been poor, but our house was paid for because he built it.
That's impressive. So now you go to Mississippi, earn a bachelor's degree in mathematics. During the course of your college career, are you intent on serving in the military at this point?
I was, and that's an interesting story, so I'll just briefly tell it. But I wanted to be a Navy pilot. I went to Mississippi State, and I'm a first-generation high school graduate, much less ever go to college. So I knew nothing about going to college. So I just showed up, didn't apply, didn't know I was supposed to apply. Just showed up.
Really?
Yep.
You don't hear
that often, but it just
Rudy over here.
That's pretty funny. I like that show for that reason too, because he just showed up as well. So I showed up, and that was a bit of a show in and of itself. But didn't have any money, and had to do things to try to stay there. One of which was to get into Air Force ROTC, and ultimately I got a full scholarship, a pilot scholarship to fly, and I wanted to be a pilot in the Navy. So if I'm going to be a pilot in the Air Force, all the Air Force Academy guys had jump wings. So as an Air Force ROTC guy, I wanted to have jump wings. And I'd learned that we could go to Army Airborne School, but nobody had ever gone to Airborne School from Mississippi State. And nobody really was wanting to allow me to do it, but I just kept pushing it. And I went to Airborne School in August of 90. And when I was there, Operation Desert Shield kicked off. But I was there with 13 Navy SEALs. First time I'd ever even heard of SEALs or known of them. And, they combined myself and the 13 SEALs and busted our asses together. And so when I finished, Airborne School, Desert Shield turned into Desert Storm. And after Desert Storm, the Air Force reduced by 500,000. So 500,000 were reduced in 91. And so all the pilot slots got taken away from Air Force ROTC, except for a few. Some real studs got to keep theirs. and
Okay.
but 7 of us didn't. And I was told, you'll go do something else for 3 years since you have a math degree. They want to send me to be an intel officer, which I didn't want to do that. So I competed. I didn't accept a commission in the Air Force and competed for the Navy. Took the Navy SEAL entrance exam and competed to be an officer. And that year they picked 3 officers. 2, I think it was Bud's class 183, I think. 183, graduated in October of 92. I think it's 183. I was supposed to join. And they had 3 guys that got picked up. 2 were swimmers from Yale, and 1 was a swimmer from Brown or Harvard or something. So they had 3 guys, and 2 of them quit. I was freaking pissed. Yeah, so I ended up meeting somebody who was in the Bud class. One of my other buddies had the list of the names, and I realized, I know him, and so had a conversation, find out that 2 of those idiots quit. So 2 guys who were college swimmers. One of them was a water polo. I mean, here's studs. I mean, these are freaking studs, and they quit.
Yeah.
So anyway, when that happened, when I got my orders, they said, hey, you're going to go to Pensacola, Florida to be a pilot. And I didn't even apply to be a pilot. Like when I was filling out applications, SEAL, nothing. I mean, I could always go back and be a pilot in the Air Force, do the intel officer for a few years and then go fly. So it didn't even apply to be a pilot. So when my orders came out, they first called like December 17th of 91 and said, hey, when can you start? And I was like, I can start tomorrow. And they said, well, 1st of January of 92, we want you to start OCS up in Newport, Rhode Island, and we have a BUDS class starting in March of 92. And I'm like, cool. And they said the orders come out on Friday. And so I was not going to take a commission in the Air Force. I'm waiting to get an officer program in the Navy. My orders come, and this is back before we had email, or before we had email or even the internet. So it was a fax, and it said, report to Pensacola, Florida, February 22nd. And I'm like, wait a second, February 22nd, Pensacola, that's AOCS. So I call, and they're like, yep, it's you got selected to be a pilot. It's this or nothing. And I said,
so you didn't even apply to be a pilot? Like I thought, just you had to apply, number one, and most of those guys are going to get turned down anyway. And you didn't even apply.
So that means that they just, because they had seen that I had done well on in a light aircraft screening program that we had in the Air Force. I finished first in the nation out of that, or finished first out of my class, and so they just picked me. So I said, okay, I'll go be a pilot, and then what I'll do is I'll get my commission, and then I'll go try to become a SEAL. So I went to flight school, did well. I finished first in the nation. I got selected jets, so I went to go fly. So I flew T-34, then the T-2, and then the A-4, and so I was doing carrier quals, waiting for carrier quals. And I had like 4 months, and so I went TAD, temporary duty with SEAL Team 4, and I showed up with jump wings, and I had a NAM, Navy Achievement Medal, because I saved a lady who was drowning, and so they just thought I was an Officer SEAL.
Today's episode is brought to you by Cutting Edge Testosterone Therapy, a veteran-owned, family-run clinic led by a retired first responder. At Cutting Edge, they help men and women rebuild strength, focus, and vitality through advanced hormone therapy, peptides, and performance-based weight management. Whether you've served your country, your community, or your family, Cutting Edge helps you get your edge back safely, professionally, and with people who understand what service takes out of you. Cutting Edge offers individualized care with no monthly fees or contracts. Learn more at cuttingedgetestosteronetherapy.com. Cutting Edge Testosterone Therapy, built by those who serve, for those who still do. So what does that mean? Like when you were sent to them, what does that actually mean? What are you supposed to be doing with
just
those
hanging
guys?
out. So I had 4 months, so I just was going to be temporary duty for them just to kick my ass for 4 months. Well, I was waiting to go for carrier qual.
And this is on a regular team. This is not a
SEAL
training.
Team 4. So I showed up, and new guys were showing up as well. So I was there as the officer and 2 enlisted guys, and we're all coming in together. Now, obviously, these 2 enlisted guys know that I didn't go to BUDS with them.
Yeah.
And they're like, what are you doing? And I was like, I got jump wings. And I said, well, I'm just, I'm a pilot. I'm a pilot candidate. And so I show up, and they just think I'm a officer. And they're like, hey, we didn't know we were getting an officer. And I was like, I'm a pilot. And they said, what the hell are you doing here? And so I tell them, and they're just looking at me, and they're like, hey, listen, you guys got to go get wet. And so it was like December. And so we were out on SEAL Team 4 at the time, I think was on the wharf. So they took us to the end of the wharf, and it was like a 20-foot drop off into and so they're like, okay, go get wet. And so the two SEALs, enlisted guys, start taking their shoes off, and I just took off, ran and jumped off the, and so then they now have to jump in with all their clothes on.
Hell
They jump
yeah.
in, and we hit the water and pop up. And the dude looks at me and says, "Man, what the hell? Well, why didn't you take your shoes off?" And I was like, "I don't know. They told us to go get wet, so I got wet." So we shimmied back up and got up there. And so at that point, they then learned that I wasn't a SEAL. They didn't know that at that point. They thought or didn't know I was a BUD/S graduate. I'm like, "What the hell are you doing here?" So the commander calls me in and says, "Hey, what are you doing here?" And I was like, "Well, your command master chief knows a buddy of mine who was a Team 4 guy, Country Dave." And he was like, "Oh, you know Country Dave?" I said, "Yeah, he's from my hometown in Mississippi." And I said, "So he just got me a TAD so Master Chief Russell could just kick my ass." And so they did it for a few months, and I got an ear infection because I'm in this cool water. So I come back to do my carrier quals, and so we only go to 1,000 feet. We do our practice. It's called FCLPs, Field Carrier Landing Preparation. So you only go to 1,000 feet, do your practices. Well, when I got ready to go do my quals in Key West, we're up at 36,000 feet in a 4-plane formation, diving down. And I blew my eardrum up.
Oh.
And so then that kind of perpetuated itself into more of a perception issue than anything. And flight school ended because this was at this point 94 for me. And so they're like, so I called the SEAL team commander, and he said, "Hey, listen, we'll just bring you here, get you ready, and then send you to BUD/S." And then I just promoted to O2, and I didn't have a warfare qual. So they're like, "We can't send you to a SEAL team, and you can't go get a BUD/S slot because you're now an O2, and you need a warfare qual. And so we're going to send you to C. You're going to be a SWO, a surface warfare officer." And I literally thought that I'd just gone to jail. And so I dropped my paperwork to resign, and they said, "Nope, we don't have enough people in your year group now because it was like a short hiring cycle." And so I was like, "Oh no!" And so I ended up getting selected for a really fantastic job working with the intel agencies, working with computer and data analytics and some other computer simulations. Working with NEMA, NGA, which is who the group was, and with some of the imagery intelligence components of the CIA and DIA. And so all those things were cool because they brought me into this area. But when I was talking to the SEAL team commander, I said, "You mean to tell me that I'm not going to be able to go be a SEAL? And so I'm not going to be able to be a warrior? I've trained my whole life to be a warrior." And he said, "Have you ever heard of the FBI's hostage rescue team?" And I said, "No." And he goes, "Yeah, they're chock full of Navy SEALs." He said, "You should go there and try that." And so I said, "Okay." And so then I started that process, and it took me 7 years to get into the FBI.
That's crazy. We were talking about that. That's amazing. What's nuts is that, as you and I were talking on the phone, I failed the polygraph. Had I not, you and I potentially may have been in the same class.
I wish I had known you because we could have done something to get you a different polygrapher because they're not supposed to give you the same one twice.
Yeah, I wish I would have known. I didn't even know I could appeal. You didn't even tell me.
Well, I didn't pass phase 2, as I told you earlier, so just for everybody's knowledge. So I didn't pass phase 2 the first time. I took phase 1 and passed it, and then I didn't pass phase 2. So I had a person there who was really interesting. It's supposed to be a neutral environment when you take your phase 2.
Which is oral boards for anyone that's watching this. You go before. Mine was three-person FBI agent board, and it's a 2-hour interview essentially, and they ask you everything under the sun.
They ask you at that point. They were asking like 15 questions, and it's behavioral-based interview questions, meaning past performance is indicative of future performance, and so you look for examples in your life that. So anyway, whatever reason, the guy didn't like my examples, and so I wasn't selected, and so then it was that was the beginning of hiring freezes. So that was like 96, 97, 98. And so, the time I finally got in the bureau, the agent hiring had been, a couple of year hiring freeze, and I got hired and brought in as a computer forensic examiner, working crimes against children, which is, something, Mike, you and I were talking about earlier. And to be honest, that was difficult. I would not be able to do that now because I have a child. But even then, I came home after, seeing like, 200,000 gay child porn images. And I just was angry. And I just said, God, do I need to do this in order to go be a warrior? And I think it was because I worked that and caught one of my greatest cases. I caught a doctor from the first Gulf War who was putting his stepdaughter and stepniece asleep using Versed and was, sexually abusing them, but not to the point of physical damage to the children. But still, I was able to catch him and use technology that I had gained from being a skydive videographer. Same, he's a Sony Handycam, which is what he used, and he tried to.
How'd you catch him,
sorry?
Drew? How'd you catch him?
So he was using Handycams and camera media, and this was back in '99, 2000. So it was all brand new, and he got hacked by a Turk. So a guy from Turkey who was a vigilante got onto one of these, bulletin board systems for freaking pedophiles, and was doing like a 2-for-1. You send me 3 images, I'll send you 2. And the guy from Turkey put a Trojan horse into the doctor. So this doctor, sending him images, received his images and put his own back orifice to where this gave this guy access. And so this Turk went in and found all these images of these children who were. So you're going to have to tell me what of this we can talk about and what we can't, because I don't even know how this works.
Yeah, I mean, anything.
Demonetized.
Yeah, people need to hear about this.
So I saw pictures of the children. They were comatose, and so he was giving them Versed and had like a pulse ox on their finger, and the Turk did an IP search on the guy and realized he was from Montgomery, and so Montgomery, Alabama. So then contacted the Montgomery police, and the Montgomery police, in a really kind of a bad move, redirected the Turk to go back in there to see what else he could find. So now you have law enforcement sending a civilian into search a subject without a search warrant. And so the federal judge, who's an old guy, threw out all of the images. At that point, this guy had realized he'd been hacked, and so he had 3 PCs and 2 laptops. And so when the FBI was finally given the case, and it was one of my buddies, her name is Margaret, she's fantastic. When she was given the case, she did the search warrant, and he had already realized that he had been hacked. So he had thrown away his hard drives of his 2 PCs, or his 3 PCs and his 2 laptops, but he didn't get rid of his camera media. He just wiped them because they were super expensive. Thumb drives and small media. And so whenever they did the search warrant, he had already realized he'd been, so they're gone. So then we had all this camera media. And so I joined the Bureau. I started getting hired in '99. Then I came on March of 2000. When I got there, they'd been there for a year, and nobody knew what to do with camera media. And so I was like, hey, look, I'm not the sharpest knife in the stack, but this is the stuff I use for shooting videography for skydiving. So let me see what I can do. And so I just found guys who were smarter than me, guys at the agency who were working on the exploitation of digital analytics or digital images. And I found a team in Brussels, the Netherlands, who actually built a piece of software that would actually look at logical ones and zeros. And even though when you reformat any kind of media, it kind of destroys the structure of this image, and so it no longer looks like an image. So it doesn't have the header and the footer of a JPEG or an MPEG or something like that whenever you reformat it. Well, what this software does was it logically looked at ones and zeros, and it said if these ones and zeros are spaced in a certain parameter, a certain way. This is again back in 2000. But if they're built in a certain way, this is an image. And so this exploiting of the free space or all the slack space or all the extra space that's on those on the camera media, and I come up with portions of images. I'd have a portion here and a portion here and a portion here. And what's interesting is one of the pictures, which was the one where the girl was comatose on the doctor, and he was manually manipulating himself as well as touching her, and all you could see in that image was just his hands and her private parts. And so we made him hold a roll of quarters, and we forensically fingerprint identifiers, went through the scars and marks on his fingers to determine it was him. And we put his ass in jail, and he got 25 years, and this was 25 years ago, so he got out a year or so ago. But this is the best part. So when we when I discovered this stuff, and we're going to get him out, put him in jail, the guys who were prosecuting said, screw the feds. If they're going to hose us on, throwing all this material out that was originally got before the law enforcement sent the Turkish guy back in there, if they still want to throw it out all of it, we're going to give the state the first chance to prosecute him. So we got him prosecuted. So when they brought him back for his federal hearing, because we're going to file jointly as well, it'll run concurrent though, won't be consecutive. The marshals made him stay in his red jumpsuit or orange jumpsuit, because red is federal. So on the back of his orange jumpsuit, somebody had written "My bitch," and they moved into court. So,
Nice.
So that was the story before, and then 9/11 happened, and so I was in first class fiscal year 02. So I started December of 2001. So September of 01, 9/11, October 1, the new fiscal year starts. So I was class 0201, and here I go. So now I'm finally able to, do the fun stuff that I wanted to do. Went to Oklahoma City, got on a SWAT team. Was a really good shot, so I was getting ready to be a firearms instructor and got selected to go to Afghanistan. I actually finally got selected to go to HRT, Hostage Rescue Team, which is what I wanted to go do. So I went through hostage rescue selection, made it through, didn't get selected, was told I needed seasoning. I mean, I was a 2-year agent at that point, wasn't a military veteran. I was a military veteran, but not a spec ops guy, so they're looking for former Navy SEALs and other tier 1s or SOCOM kind of guys. So a buddy of mine who passed away as a first responder. He was the first guy in the Bureau to die related to exposure from the Pentagon. His name is Bob Roth. He was buddies with someone who was doing the selection for folks going to Afghanistan and Iraq. And when I made it through HRT selection but wasn't selected, he called this person who was doing the selecting and told him about it. They were buddies. My friend was the anthrax investigator, Bob Roth. So he was doing the anthrax investigations. And this other guy who was doing the selection for guys going overseas said, "Hey, do you think Drew would like to go to Afghanistan?" And my buddy was like, "Yeah, absolutely." And so I got selected. And then somebody who was supposed to go to a SEAL team got hurt or something. And so then they called me and said, "Hey, you think Drew wants to go to a SEAL team?" And it was just as if God said, Drew, I'm going to give you the desires of your heart, because this is what. Yeah. And honestly, it was the most amazing opportunity I've ever been in. And I didn't stop and think, hey Drew, what do you need to do to get these warriors to like you? I just basically was like, God has put me in this position, and now I'm able to just go do the job. And for folks who are going to be listening and wondering what the FBI is doing there, I'll share this part with you. So after 9/11, Operation Anaconda, one of my HRT buddies was in Anaconda, an SF guy, and they were given the directives to capture or kill whoever you capture. They're called pucks, person under control. Interrogate them, get fingerprints, get their pocket litter, and bring it back. Well, this was when Dev was mostly SEAL Team 6 was mostly in Afghanistan, and Delta was in Iraq, and these guys were chopping the hands off and bringing hands back for us to roll their prints. And then we'd have a big bag of stuff, an Iridium phone and some thumb drives or whatever, and have like eight mopes over here. And we're like, well, who has this Iridium? Where'd this come from? And so we're realizing, these guys aren't evidence collectors. They know how to make folks' heads explode, but they don't know how to do anything else. And so they took dudes who were fit and who were law enforcement, and we obviously know crime scene evaluations and investigations, and embedded us as what's called a tactical embed with the SEAL teams. And so when I got to the SEAL team, and so Eddie Penny was on the team, Sean Ryan was on the team. I got to get a story about Sean to tell here in a sec.
Oh, nice.
I got a funny story to tell too, but I won't tell that one. That's probably embarrassing to him, but I'll tell another one. But,
get that one off.
So we got there, and my job was to train them on crime scene evaluations, SSE, called sensitive site exploitation. But I was there a couple of days before them, and this just worked out just where God just blessed me so much. And by the way, and Adam Brown as well. So everyone else who's watching this, Adam, I was the one in the Humvee with Adam. But when they started driving in, they're coming in like deuce and a half trucks, and so I'm all of a sudden here in Iraq, and so I walk out, and I'm just an old dude. I mean, I have a beard, except it's not gray like this. It was all dark for the most part. And I walk out, and they just see some old guy there, and there's task force guys who are there, which means they might be from an SDV team, like all the guys were from Red Wings, or they might be from another SEAL team that's augmenting. And so I hear all the guys come up, and I walk outside, and they're all unloading all their gear. And the first person I see is Sean Ryan. He's a young guy at that point. This is 20 years ago. And so I just look at him and say, hey, do you have more than 2 bags? And he just looks at me like, who the hell are you? And he goes, yeah, that's what's your bags. And with these 2. So he picks up his 2 100-pound each, totes, and I grab 2, and I just go to his hooch, set it down, and I just walk out. And I do that for 2 hours. I don't introduce myself. I don't talk to him, because if anybody knows, team guys don't want to be talked to. They want to talk to you. They don't want you trying to infiltrate them. And I wasn't even really worried about it. I just was like, I'm just doing my thing, and I'm not doing anything, so let me help them. So I helped every one of them, and then every one of them were looking like, who the hell is this guy? And so I have a little hooch off to the side. There's a wood paneling, building with a bunch of little rooms. And so they saw me go into mine, and they saw FBI on the top of it. And so they're like, hey, this guy's FBI. So now that's probably 1:30 or 2 when they got there. And so now it's dinner time, and I'm walking out, and so they, at some point, a bunch of them came into my room, like, oh, so you're the FBI? And I said, oh, yeah. And they're asking what I'm doing there and what I'm teaching. I'm teaching them this, that, and the other. And so they realize that I kind of have a neat position. And so then it gets time for dinner, and I'm starting to walk out, and they're walking out, and they're like, hey, FBI, you want to come to dinner with us? I'm like, oh, yeah. And so all my guys are seeing me right there with them. They're like, hey, somehow Drew got in with them.
Yep.
And so then I just started teaching. I started teaching SSE and doing other things. And so the funny story with Sean was, the Mitch helmets that we have now that have no ears.
Yeah.
Well, then Delta Dev, everybody had them with ears. So you had to stick your Peltors, or we had these little things that are just on one side with just a microphone on, and you have your helmet with the ears on it. And all of the team guys had theirs cut out. And I was like, man, that's pretty cool. And so I said something to someone, and Sean's like, oh, yeah, I did that. So Sean is the one who cut the ears out and made the basic Mitch helmets. And so
really?
I said, dude, I wish I had one of those. He goes, I've got an extra one. So I should have brought it down and showed it to you. It's upstairs. These dum-dums sent it to me. So so we cut it out and made it look good. But in my crash, in the accident, and we talked about that in a little bit, they had my head resting in that thing, and it just filled full of blood. And when I didn't die, they're like, hey, we need to send this to Drew. So those idiots sent it to me in the hospital. It's all full of blood. My scarf was all covered in blood. It smelled terrible. I mean, it had all my blood, because my whole side of my head, my ear, and everything was torn off. And so it just poured like a stuck pig. But anyway, so I'll let you ask questions or tell me where you want me to go from here.
Yeah, so it's great that you're getting in with these guys, because real definitely recognizes real, and if they didn't think you're worth it, they're definitely not pulling you into the circle at all. So now the day-to-day begins. What are you doing with these guys? Are you actually with them, or are you just teaching them and they're going to do their own thing and you guys are doing your own thing?
I got to do all the stuff with them. So we would do, I wasn't the horse holder, but I also wasn't supposed to be number one either. But you know what? When you're in a stack, you don't know. It's like Rob said, Rob O'Neill. When he entered in, he was supposed to be here, and then he finds himself at the stairwell with, one person in front of him doing a squeeze, and they're up, here they go. And so I looked like them. I was a really good shot, so you couldn't tell the difference. And so I would just integrate with them. This is the funny part, is so I wasn't on HRT, and the only people in the FBI that are supposed to do rappelling or doing fast roping into a site are supposed to be HRT. Well, whatever. I mean, oh well. So I get there, and they're like, "Oh, Drew, we're gonna wrap into rappel into this site. Are you rappel certified, or are you air assault certified?" And I said, "Oh, dude, I'm a rappel master for the SWAT team, so I'm good to go." That only meant that I know how to handle ropes. It did not answer the question. But I was like,
exactly.
I was like, the hell you say? I'm not going to, one, give you the answer that's true, and two, I'm not going to get out of that. I'll ask for permission instead of I'll ask for forgiveness.
Better to ask forgiveness than permission. That's what I always say, baby.
So we hit a site and went out of the airplane, hit a site, went through and did some training. And one of our guys, who's our command master chief, was a neat guy. He was a good friend to me. He was friends with Country Dave, the guy who I told you about was from my hometown. They went through buds together.
Yep.
So when Matto is his name, when Matto realized, was talking to me, where you at? Where you from? And I said, Northeast Mississippi. And he's like, really? What town? So I tell him, he goes, do you know Mrs. So-and-so? And I was like, yes. And so it was one of Dave's cousins, and he's been to her house and had dinner whenever they finished buds. And we're driving from the West Coast to the East Coast to go to airborne school. He was in my hometown. So he and I were connected immediately. And it was just like God was just saying, hey, Drew, I'm gonna let everything work out for you. And so, so we're going through, and Matto was following along afterwards. And so as we're standing there, he wasn't on a helicopter. He was already out at the site. So we're coming in, simulating what we're going to be doing. And so all of a sudden he looks up and sees me, and he goes, Drew, were you in the stack? I said, yeah, I was number 2. And he goes, wow, I couldn't tell you from all the rest of them. And I was like, and I just thought to myself, that's what I wanted to hear. And so then shortly thereafter, I started teaching. So I just set up basically a mock crime scene. We're there at the compound, and it's not quite what they're going to see, because we're seeing caves and shitholes, and I mean literally just, crappy places. But I just try to make it as as realistic as possible. But mainly, what I was teaching the guys is photography and drawing and labeling, how to handle each person under control. I made little devices you put around their neck and put all their pocket litter, and then just explain the process that we want. For one, we want to isolate the people so they can't talk. We want to clear whatever's on them before we handcuff or zip tie, and whatever pocket litter we put into this little device, and then we write stuff on about it. We ask them their question, their name, their surname, their tribe, where they're from, because many of these guys were foreign fighters, and so they would either tell us or they wouldn't, but whatever, we'll take them back and work on them later. And so teach that, and then just teach search and seizure. And most of these guys have never done it before, which is really cool, because my thoughts were this will allow me the opportunity to recruit some of these guys into HRT or into the FBI. And some of them came in, and then like Sean went the other direction, went with with our sister agency, and went with Ground Branch as I guess he was a green badge, and did like what the guys did in Benghazi. And so that was a blast. We did that, and I remember one time it's pretty funny. One of the guys asked me, I'd forgotten about this, because I was there for a month, and I had the brain injury, or had the injuries, and then, so I was.
Oh, so it was that quick?
Oh yeah, it was terrible. I mean, right up to the point where I was killed, it was the most enjoyment I ever had in my life. But so I'd gotten to know them the whole weekend, and I had a lot of time chatting with them, So I was able to have beer. I had alcohol. General order number 1 is no alcohol in Afghanistan. So we could go to the blue store, and I could buy beer and whiskey. And so I had a bunch, but there's a bunch there already, because I was like the 3rd FBI agent who had been there. There's all sorts of beer under my bed. And so I came out one time with like some beer in my Nalgene. So I'm sitting by the fire drinking, and we had a female who was fantastic. Her name was Tori. And so she was a nurse. And so she's like, what are you drinking, Drew? And I said, just water. You want some? So she took a drink, and she goes, oh yeah. And then, but it's a blue Nalgene, so you couldn't tell it was, Heineken, whatever it was. So the next person come out and saw Tori drinking out of my Nalgene and he's like, what is that? I said, so I went and got another one, and I was sitting here drinking, and so somebody else comes out, and I said, oh, it's water. You want some? And so I had to end up having like 4 Nalgenes. And so 4 of us are after drinking. I'm like, I'm going to get myself in trouble with this. And so I really connected with the guys, and this was probably Sunday night. So the next day was Monday. We're having our little meeting, manifest meeting, and we have a guy there named Johnny Bruce. He's a neat guy. He was the lead petty officer, and so we're sitting there getting ready to talk, and we're in like the big meeting room, and so I haven't introduced myself or said anything, and so people are like, hey, JB, can we get the FBI to introduce himself? And I just see him look kind of crestfallen, and I'm thinking, that's weird. Why is he? Kind of, because I like Johnny. Well, why is he upset that I'm going to introduce myself? And so he said, okay, Drew, you want to introduce yourself? I said, yeah, I will. And so I stood up, and just as I stood up, I said, my name is, and in unison, every one of them were like, shut the fuck up. And I was like, you guys got me.
Johnny was looking out for you.
Down. So yeah, JB was looking out for me. He didn't want me to be embarrassed.
Yep,
so at that point,
that's hilarious.
At that point, I realized I'm in. So it was a good time.
That's great. All right, so let's go to the day of the accident. Day to change your life.
So I remember breakfast of that day. And this is the funny part. There's a guy who I ended up, I didn't even know the story, but I ended up seeing him 20 years later and learning, his name is Craig, learning why I was in the Humvee with them. So we were going to go out and we were going to do some practicing, go run through some drills and do some things before we left to go to Kandahar. And so there's some kind of event that had taken place out, and the UN peacekeepers were running from it, and we were going towards it. So we're leaving to go do this practice, and all of a sudden we hear something, and we don't realize that there's a whole Humvee convoy of UN peacekeepers driving like freaking wild Indians. But so are we. Everybody drives like you're in stolen vehicles. And so my buddy Craig was supposed to be in my seat, but his med kit was too big, and so he got in the Humvee number 1. And now there was a seat available in Humvee number 2. And so Adam Brown, the book Fearless, was our Humvee commander. And Adam, people would always make fun of him. Matter of fact, there was even somebody there that wouldn't ride in a Humvee with Adam because he was so accident prone. So that guy ended up coming to the bureau. So I know him. So it's pretty funny to see dudes who just such a small world. It's really not, but among this group it is. So,
as Chris Wiley once said, he's a former SEAL. He's been on my podcast. It's not a small world, just big people.
that's exactly. So, Adam comes to me and says, "Hey, Drew, I've got a spot in my Humvee. Do you want to ride with me out to the site? Because I was going to be going with some FBI guys. So I was going to be separately going with some dudes who weren't on the SEAL team, but I was just bringing them with me just because we were going to shoot the goose off. We were going to throw some hand grenades, and I was just like, hey, you guys want to go do so? Like, when would I get to do that as an FBI agent? And so they were going to, and then I come back to him and say, hey, guys, just meet us out there because I'm riding with Adam. I got asked to go. And this is how it all started. So I remember breakfast of that day. I don't remember most of anything else. A lot of the stuff I remember now is because I read it in a book, and some of the other people have talked about it. And so I've learned what that situation was. So we're on our way out there, and we're coming up a hill, and we're driving like we're in stolen vehicles. And so so we're in a 5 Humvee convoy, and they're in a 4 Humvee convoy. And as we approach each other, number ones see each other and get on the brakes and get out of each other's way. So they hit the sides of the road, and now it's a 1-lane road. So now it's just talcum powder. So number ones avoid each other. Number 3s are able to get on their brakes. 4s and 5s, they're able to stop. Well, number 2s is where we were, and we got sideways. And then I see some of the pictures. So if at some point you want to throw one up, or if that's how this works, you can show that.
Yeah. I'll see if those
but
guys
I took the direct hit on my door, and I don't remember anything. 2 weeks later, I wake up. I'm in Walter Reed. So I made it back to Bagram, and then Landstuhl, and then Walter Reed. And this is the cool part. I was rescued in 9 minutes by Task Force 160.
Wow.
And the reason that I was rescued so quickly is because whoever our JTAC was there, whoever sent out the 9 line, the Night Stalkers, they only fly at night. They happen to be traversing from Kabul to Bagram at 3:30 in the afternoon, and the pilot is a former SEAL. His name is Michael Rutledge. And there's been all sorts of cool, and I have to tell you how I met him too. It's a great story. So he was a former SEAL. You got to get him on your podcast. He's a former SEAL. You can do it. There's all sorts of really cool YouTubes about him. But he heard that the SEAL team was down, and so he's flying back. And guys, we're gonna go get them. So within 9. So by the way, my injury. So I took the direct hit to the head, and you described it nicely in the intro. But I broke my ankle, triple broke my tibia with a double compound fracture. Went through my quad. I broke my wrist, ribs, jaw, back, jaw, nose. Tore the side of my head, my ear off, and then the muzzle of my weapon came through my armpit. Permanently destroyed the rear deltoid, outer scapula, all 4 rotator cuff are gone. Supraspinatus, infraspinatus, teres major, minor, and then the outer bicep. So all the muscles allowed me to do this are gone. So now my neck and my back raise it up, and so I wake up, a few weeks later, and I am more messed up than Christmas turkey. And this is the funniest
my
part.
God.
Is he?
Drew, can you imagine, choose you 1 second, if you had been taken to a teaching hospital and orthopedic surgeons go in there and there's like 15 orthopedic surgeons to be? Like, this is a dream case for those guys. Obviously, it's a nightmare for you. But, I mean, you never hear of injuries like this. That is incredible. And actually, 1 second, guys, we're going to take a quick break right now. Come right back. And bam, right back.
All right. So now we're back. So good. Hey, good memory. So what's amazing is these guys have had so much experience with blown up legs that they put me in an external fixator, and so they drilled into the toe and into the top of the foot and into the heel and into the shin, above all the places the shin was broken. And I think I sent you that picture too. And it was perfectly lined up. So much so that I was able to heal, get back where I was running marathons, was able to go back and train for HRT again, went through the selection again, was selected. And
that's world-class medical care.
It was world-class. So when I woke up, though, it was 3 weeks later, and I was at Walter Reed at this point, and I still had blood and dirt in my hair. And so the director and his wife, Director Muller and his wife Ann, came to see me, and I stunk. And she was livid. So she said, "Get him the hell out of here." And so while I was at Walter Reed, I got staph infection, which almost killed me. And it was just after that this happened. Who knows what the impetus was, but that's when Walter Reed closed and the new Walter Reed was built. That was January of 96. Of 2006. And so shortly thereafter is when this happened. And so Adam came up to see me, and Adam's story is even better. So Adam, let me just tell that story real quick. You mind?
Yeah, absolutely.
So Adam Brown, most of you guys hopefully who are watching us know this or have read the story, Fearless. So I'm the FBI agent. I used a different name. So I'm FBI agent Billy White. That was my best friend growing up in Mississippi, karate instructor. So I used Billy's name. Adam had been, great story. I want you guys to read the book, but I'll just give this little highlight. So Adam had been selected for Team 6, and after having gone through selection or tryout before he showed up for Green Team, he got his right eye shot out in a simunitions accident. So he went from a right-handed right eye shooter to right-handed left eye shooter. And then in our accident, he gets all of his fingers cut off, and they have to put them back on. So right-handed right eye, right-handed left eye, now left-handed left eye. And so Adam is really messed up. I'm hurt the worst. There's 5 of us in there. So, 4 people seated and 1 person in the turret, and we're hit, and the thing rolls 3 times. But I'm so pinned that I'm stuck. Everybody else gets thrown out. And the individual who had been sitting in my seat, Craig, is the first person to me, because he's seeing this happening in the rearview mirror, and he's like, "Dude, that's where I was seated." So he thought I'm dead. So he shows up, and I don't learn this until 2 years ago, when I realized that one of my best friends in the bureau and Craig were roommates at Bud's. The world is not this small. And my retirement, this guy, Ron, was at my retirement, and then Ron goes to his 30-year Bud's reunion, and Craig says, "Hey, you're in the FBI. Do you know Drew Barnett?" And he goes, and so both Ron and his wife are like, we know Drew. And so then Craig calls me, and so I end up learning this. So during my accident rollover, I'm stuck there. Everybody else is, thrown out like freaking popcorn. Popping popcorn is what it looked like. That's what the Tory said. The female, she was behind us, the nurse. Okay. She said, "Look like popcorn. People just flying out of the HUMVEE." And I was stuck. So Craig gets to me, and I'm wadded up right outside the HUMVEE, stuck. I'm impaled. I'm impaled from the HUMVEE. Yep. I'm impaled by my weapon, and so we all have, BDE, our load bearing equipment, LBEs, whatever we want to call them, and we have hand grenades on there. So here I'm an FBI agent with hand grenades. So I have 2 hand grenades, but we have our spoon taped, because you can tear through that spoon and that tape if you need to, and give that thing, pull your pin and give it a whirl. But your spoon is taped. Well, in my crash, my pin gets pulled, my tape gets cut, and my spoon is half off. It's only on one side, and Craig looks in, and it's in my crotch. How about that? I'll go through all that and then die because my freaking hand grenade blows up in my balls. And so Craig reaches down and grabs it and says, "Live grenade." And then he runs out into the desert, gives it a chunk, and it doesn't explode. And so I say to him later, well, what'd you do? He said, I don't give a shit. Screw them. They can go deal with it. But I was telling my wife this morning. I was thinking about doing this podcast that, when Craig told me this, I was like, dude, man, you risked your life for me. And he said, absolutely, because you would risk yours for us. And I thought that's cool. In that short of time, these guys knew who I was. And I just felt I felt like God had blessed me with where I was supposed to be. So, so that was that part of it. And then I just had a long healing process to go through to get back to square one.
And how are you going through this process? Are you, telling yourself, no matter, I am doing this? Or, I mean, it's got to be points periodically where you're like, man, I don't know. I don't think it's going to happen.
A lot of this ties into even the journey that I just went on as well. The one thing I remember is it took me 7 years to become an agent. As I said, I didn't get through phase 2 the first time. Well, now they're going to medically retire me, and I have no desire to go. So I learned I'm being medically retired, and I developed 5 prayers that were progressive steps for my healing. So one was to get back on duty as quick as I could, go to firearms instructor school because I already been selected before I went, get back on SWAT, go back to Afghanistan, and then go back to HRT selection and pass, and do that in 3 years. And so those were my goals. But at that point, I was so messed up. I'd been on nerve blocks when I was at Walter Reed. And then when I got moved, because I was filthy, to the rehab hospital, they were giving me shots of Dilaudid and Demerol, which, I mean, I was really, really messed up. And so when I got out of the hospital, I was there for a few months. I was already an addict. I was addicted to opiates.
Oh,
so now I'm taking Oxycontin. So I'm taking the equivalent of 18 Percocet twice a day. And I was more messed up than the Christmas turkey. So my buddy, a guy named Doug, the bureau. I was single then. So the bureau sent him to be there with me. And he realized, man, he didn't know how much I was taking. I was strung out. And so he calls my SAC, special agent in charge, and tells him. So my SAC calls me and says, hey, Drew, do you, because the bureau's going to medically retire me. Well, what am I going to do? And he goes, do you want to come back? And I'm like, absolutely. And he goes, well, you have to get off this medication, because if you are addicted to this, you'll never come back. And so that day, I quit everything. So I flushed probably 190 of those pills down the toilet. And then
you went cold turkey?
I just quit cold turkey.
Oh,
and then
man, how was that?
Awful. It was more painful than what I had gone through. My core temperature dropped to like 96.4. So it was miserable. So one of my buddies who's a early gen HRT, he was Gen 2, he called me and said, Drew, tough times end, tough men don't. Something like that. It's a funny neat little saying. And I just thought that was a pretty good saying, because that was tough for me.
Yeah, and actually I definitely want to touch on the TBI progress that you made using Ibogaine specifically. So when we get to that, I definitely want to hit on that big time. So I find that fascinating. You just quit cold turkey. I had an opioid addiction I developed myself. Never did a drug in my life, but smoked weed in high school. And had a horrible first marriage. And this tramadol that I had been taking for years as prescribed, I noticed kind of dulled the pain of everything going on around me. So I just started taking more and more until I was taking over 50 a day some days. Had 8 seizures in 3 years. Finally stopped me on the 8th one. But I can't imagine. I actually wanted to do an outpatient rehab, and they're like, no, because you're taking so much. We want you in, and we want to wean you off. I can't imagine going cold turkey. One night I didn't get my FedEx delivery because it was either my doctor or at the time it was legal to get online. So I missed my FedEx delivery, and I was DTing that night. It was the worst feeling in the world. I cannot imagine the way you did it.
Well, the thing, and that's the craziest part, especially when you lean into the rest of the story that we're going to get into, to think that I then was arrested, being accused of being in an illegal drug conspiracy, when I'm taking medication. Maybe I should let that crawl into the situation naturally. But to consider that I'm taking a medication that I cannot carry a weapon and be a law enforcement officer, opiates, and I immediately said, hey, I know what I got to do. If I want to be a FBI agent, want to get back on HRT, I've got to deal with it. And it was painful.
Yeah.
So So I did that.
You know what's amazing, though, Drew? There should be a much more strict protocol as far as watching guys like yourself who are going through surgeries. You're going to become addicted to it. To me, there's no way you cannot be. So you need to create a program to wean these guys off, knowing it just becomes physically addictive, man. There's no other way to it's going to get you addicted. There's no way around it.
Well, at that point, I was the first agent injured in the War on Terror and the greatest injured agent in the War on Terror that was, active, as opposed to our guys who died, as a result of their interactions with the crime scenes. But at that point, I mean, I was and I don't think the Bureau. I mean, everything was screwed up. I mean, I got a $182,000 bill for my C-17 ride. I mean, it was all sorts of crazy things. I mean, you got to figure, here I was a FBI agent in war. I mean, going, direct action and having interactions where I'm just like the military, yet once I'm injured, I wasn't handled like the military at all. Matter of fact, at that point, I didn't even have a VA rating because all the injuries that I had sustained, from airborne school and skydiving with Naval Academy, blowing my eardrum up, pulling G's, hurting my back, hurting my neck. None of that stuff did I even get evaluated when I left the Navy because all I wanted to do was go be a warrior. So I had no desire to do all that stuff. But at that point was when, so this has been probably 8 months since the accident. Adam, who I was telling about earlier, who had his right eye shot out, his fingers cut off, and now he's a left hand, left eye. He goes back and says to SEAL Team 6, "Hey, I deserve to go through Green Team. You guys had nothing to lose." And they're like, "There's no way this guy's going to make it through." And so they selected him. And at that point, it was like the summer, fall of 2006. So it had been not quite a year, 10 months, and I could barely walk into the counterterrorism center where I was working. But Adam went to Green Team, made it all the way through Green Team. It was at the last phase, which is MFF, military freefall. And having been a skydiving instructor, as I mentioned earlier, a skydiver from working the camera media with the doctor, I was also a skydiving instructor, AFF instructor, stand-up instructor. And Adam knew that. And also, Adam was a believer. I was a believer. And Adam and I had a lot of good conversations because at that point, neither one of us had any direct action against the enemy. And we're just talking about, where God looks at that. How is that looked upon as a believer? And, both of us felt, very much that, just like with, David in the Bible, who's a man after God's own heart. Saul had killed his thousands and David had killed his 10,000s. So you know what? When we're doing God's work as well, I mean, I still consider that, taking a life in war is not killing. It's not murder. It's defending our freedom. And so Adam was going through MFF and he was about to wash out because he can't free fall stable. So he had failed 2 jumps. And so it rained that day, so he didn't get a jump that morning. So he was talking to his wife, and then he said, "Hey, I'm going to call Drew," knowing that I was a skydiving instructor. So he called me, and so we're talking, and it's the morning that he's supposed to be doing his jump, and we visited. And I mean, at this point, I can't touch my chin because to touch my chin means I need to be able to raise my elbow up. Oh, yeah. And so I'm really messed up. And so we're talking, and I said, Adam. And at this point, I don't even know all of Adam's story, which you'll learn about in the book. The stories, things that he had with drugs and things. I didn't even know about that. But I just said, "Hey, Adam, God has not brought you from getting your eye shot out, your fingers cut off, to making all the way through Green Team, to then wash you out because you can't free fall stable. This is not your last chapter." And in fact, it wasn't. As a result, he healed, went back to Team 6. I healed, took 3 years, and I'm back at Team 6. And for my last deployment, so now I've healed, and I've gone back 4 more times. So this is my last deployment before I say it's time for someone else. And Adam, I come back from my deployment, and Adam is on his, and he gets killed in March of 2008, or excuse me, 2010. March of 2010, he gets killed just as I come back from my deployment. And as a result of Adam's death, members of his squadron, Gold Squadron, accepted the Lord as their Savior. And then the next year, they are all killed in the Chinook accident that you mentioned earlier, Operation Extortion. And so we have, 5 or 6 members of that squadron, of those 17 SEALs who accepted the Lord as their Savior and are in heaven with Adam now. And what's neat about Adam's story, and so I bought Fearless and I give it to people, and I like that I used my friend's name because I get to talk about it as opposed to saying, look at me, I get to talk about this other FBI agent, because it's not about me, it's about Adam. But I get to share Adam's story, and I realized, and I told Larry and Janice, which is Adam's parents, that Adam's life and story is going to touch more people in his death than it did in his life. And now the movie's coming out, the book is out, Fearless. Now the movie's going to come out, and I just think, what an amazing blessing that Adam has had in losing his life. And this is what I said earlier, all things work for good for those who love the Lord. So now we're going to get into my situation where I was arrested. So when I come back, I'm back from my last deployment, and I'm like, God, there's got to be more to life than this. And as I mentioned to you earlier, we don't stay single until we're 41, 42, if our job isn't an idol to us. And my job was an idol. A lot of people had their job as an idol and still got married. I didn't want to be a part-time husband, absentee father. So I finally said, what, God, there's got to be more to life than this. Got back and got on eHarmony, met my wife, got married. So that was 2000. Let's see, it's 2009 that I came back, and then it was 2010. So I did my last deployment, came back, and then we got married in April of 2010, and 3 months later, I am arrested by the FBI, accused of being in an illegal drug conspiracy related to the medications I'm taking. It's actually the FBI, DOJ, and OPM. So it's OPM OIG, DOJ OIG, and the FBI Inspection Division. And so these idiots decided to come after the hostage rescue team. So they had opened a case called Operation Iron Man, and they were coming after the hostage rescue team, accusing them of being in an illegal drug conspiracy to build a squad of elite warriors, and brought me in to heal me. Because like SEAL teams, HRT, Delta, they're so altruistic. They want to bring in some broke dick guy, heal him, and make him one of their own. Well, that's not how it works. But so I was arrested, went to jail, been married for 3 months, and was on leave without pay for a total of 2 years fighting this. But
crazy.
By God's grace, I had gone to the Republican National Convention in 2000 when Bush Jr. became the president, when he got his nomination. So I was in Philadelphia for that. And when I was there, I met a guy who was the House Judiciary legal advisor. And he became the U.S. attorney for the Eastern District of Virginia, who was prosecuting Zacharias Moussaoui. So I got to know him quite well. And after I was arrested, I called my buddy, who was Condoleezza Rice's chief of staff, and I knew him through skydiving. And it was through him, when he was the House Majority Leader's chief of staff, Dick Armey's chief of staff, when I went to the Republican National Convention, where I got to meet the U.S. attorney there. So through that relationship, my buddy called this U.S. attorney and said, "Hey, you remember Drew? He just got arrested." And so Brian then called his friend, who was the U.S. attorney, former U.S. attorney at the District of Columbia, where I was being prosecuted. So this individual's name is Ken. So Ken had formerly been the chief division counsel for the FBI, chief of staff to Director Mueller, U.S. attorney for the District of Columbia, deputy attorney general, and then he was then the special assistant to President Bush in charge of national security. And so I'm thinking I'm right about some of those, maybe not right about all of them. But that person becomes my pro bono attorney, and that's by God's grace.
Pro bono,
I'm still out of work for a year and a half. And these guys quickly realized that, these are not the droids they're looking for. But in the arrest, they said nothing about my accident and said Barnett has no need for medication.
What?
My team.
It's unbelievable the way these guys, if they want to go after you, will twist and turn everything inside out, upside down. God,
it is disgusting. And what's even crazier is when that happened to me. I mean, I was almost like a an abuse victim. I felt like I must have done something wrong. Did I do something wrong?
Yeah.
Now, what I had done, and this is where we get into the medication issues, was I told you I had the goals 3 years. So I was injured in '05. So in '08, I came back to HRT to fulfill. So I actually accomplished all 5 of my goals. I come back on duty, in the summer of 2006. I also, summer 2006, when I still couldn't even use my left arm, went through firearms instructor school and finished Top Gun. And then I went back to Oklahoma City, which was my first office, made it through the SWAT PT test, not even really being able to use my arm. I would just pick it up and put it up there and do my pull-ups. But just because I was fairly fit, and this thing just wasn't going to heal. It was just going to take years for it to actually work itself out. And then I got back in Afghanistan, 13 months later, was with a Ranger Battalion, and that's when I was I took out a motorcycle VBID when I was there with the guys. And so the last thing was to go back to HRT selection. So 3 years later, 2008, I went through HRT selection, but my body just hadn't healed. It just wasn't healing. I still was 25 pounds lighter than I was. So I was probably about 150 pounds. So more like 35 pounds lighter. And so one of my buddies who I'd mentioned earlier had gone through HRT selection with me, the SF guy from Anaconda, had just said, "Hey, Drew, man, do you think you can heal? Do you think that?" And I said, "I don't know. My body's not healing." And he said, I think that your brain injury has shut down your pituitary." And it turns out that he had the same issue. And so it's called hypopituitarism. So the brain injury shut down the hypopituitary, which meant I went from being an alpha on a SEAL team to having the hormones of my father, who was in his early 80s. So I got on medication that I was just paying for because in 2008 it was still so brand new that nobody knew about it. So I was taking hormone replacement and growth hormone replacement, but I wasn't taking testosterone cypionate or growth, GH, human growth hormone, HGH. I was taking peptides. One of them is called human chorionic gonadotropin, which helped me produce more of my own testosterone, and then something called sermolin, which helped me produce my own growth hormone. My body healed. I mean, I was able to get my body back.
Yeah.
So
it's a precursor. It's not a growth. It's an HGH precursor.
It was just incredible. So the people who were coming after us, if you can even believe this, the individual who was the case agent against Operation Iron Man never graduated from the FBI Academy. He washed out. When I was going through HRT selection, he couldn't pass the push-ups. And so he washed out of new agent training. And then, I don't exactly know the details, but he videoed himself doing push-ups, and his father sent it to somebody who sent it to Mueller, and they just said, make him an agent. So he left on week 13. So this is not conjecture. I have the dates that he left, the class he was in, and even one of my buddies was his DT instructor who actually NARB'd him, New Agent Review Board, when he couldn't pass a PT test. And so he came back in, and they just sent him back to Washington Field where he's going to go and give him his badge and his gun. And so that individual did a half Ironman like 10 years earlier. So he had an Ironman tattoo on his calf. So hence Operation Ironman. So
wait, so how does he even start the investigation?
He had become his own acting supervisor. So WFO, has supervisors, and they're promoting, and they have, unit chiefs, or not unit chiefs, but you'll have a supervisor or an ASAC or a SAC, and everybody's promoting, so everything's always in flux. And so he went from being like on a healthcare fraud squad to being his acting supervisor. He had an acting ASAC, had an acting SAC, and so he had some connection with, since he was doing healthcare fraud, and we used Blue Cross Blue Shield. So somehow, and I don't know, I've read some of the materials that I've done FOIA on and tried to figure out how this actually was to unscrew it. But he had gone to some healthcare fraud squad, and some individual who had formerly been either an agent or connected to the Bureau said, "Hey, there's a bunch of agents. We can tell by their blood draws that they're getting performance-enhancing drugs." There's a whole bunch of people that we're not freaking professional athletes. We're individuals who are warriors. So if we need a hormone replacement, who cares? I'm not a professional athlete. So they started this. It was during the whole Roger Clemens, Barry Bonds, Lance Armstrong fiasco. And so these guys just lost their minds, lost their ever-loving minds. And so really, like the letter I sent you, if you read all the stuff I sent you, one of them was Unbridled Ambition. And when I sent Comey a letter, which was was worthless, is that these guys just demonstrated unbridled ambition. They had an idea of what they wanted and who they thought was guilty, and did that without any evidence. Matter of fact, their medical reference that they used in writing the complaint, I wasn't even indicted. I was arrested on a book report, but their medical reference was WebMD. That's who they utilized.
Really?
So they didn't even indict me. So what they did was they hoped that they were going to, jam me up and I was going to roll over. But what's interesting is the night before my arrest, I had a dream. And in the dream, God said, tomorrow you're not going to have a job. So I'd been married for 3 months. And so I woke up, my wife was doing Bible studies, and I told her, I said, look, we need to talk about the possibility that today I'm not going to have a job. And she was incredulous. You're the most injured agent in the war on terror. And I said, well, I had this dream last night. I'm not going to have a job because I'd been called that morning. The week before, I told that morning they wanted me to come in for some interview to have some conversation with me about something that I could tell I didn't quite understand. It was having to do with a test we had to take called the Diog test, and some of you people are going to hear this and know what I'm talking about. And I thought, this is kind of weird, but I had that dream, and God said that that's one of 3 times that I had somewhat of a premonition by God that I'll share with you. But so when I was arrested 45 minutes later, 12 agents, 10 agents were outside our 1,100 square foot condo, spent 12 hours in our house trying to find whatever it is they were looking for. And whenever the guys arrested me, they started telling me all the things and sitting in front of me. This is a really funny thing. So the year before, I'd gone through HRT selection. In 2008, I'd mentioned I'd gone through and my body hadn't healed. Well, I started taking the medication, so now we get to 2009, and I make it through. I make it through selection. I passed the PT test, and so then I'm going through operation selection. I heat stroke, and so I'm not going to make it through that. They say, hey, we want you to basically be our black squadron guy equivalent, more or less, that Team 6 has. And so it's called, it's basically like a SWIC. It's like SWIC is to SEALs. That's what they wanted me to be for them. And at that point, I'm 42 years old, so I'm freaking old. And I've been crushed.
Yeah.
And I'm just thankful I've made it through the PT test and made it through, selection. And so I'm told, hey, we're going to bring you here. And then all of a sudden, when orders come, I'm not. But when I'm going through selection, it's like, I told you we had heat strokes. And I'm looking over on the hill, and there's 3 dudes in suits standing out there watching us. And we're all looking at these people, and I'm like, I wonder who these idiots are. What are these guys doing with suits out here in 110-degree weather? Well, it's the 3 guys who were sitting in front of me a year later who arrested me. And so I remembered it. I had a year and a half of leave without pay to think about it, and I remembered it then. But those 3 idiots were sitting in front of me, and they said, whoever gets on board first gets the love. And I said, gets on board with what? If you're telling me I'm under arrest, then clearly I'm going to invoke my right to counsel. And that's when it started. My friend Ken became my pro bono attorney, and a year and a half later, I came back to work, and this is where it starts getting fun. It's the same people at DOJ OIG, this corrupt group, the same people who lost their criminal case stayed and tried to do an admin case against me. So now they lost their criminal. They now are trying to do an admin. And so for an admin case, you have to come in for the interview. You're compelled. So I went in for the interview, and my lawyer was there. And I also had a employment attorney, because at this point, it's been a year and a half, I've become an expert. And I learned that the Americans with Disabilities Enhancement Act of 2009 covers pituitary disorders. So these idiots arrested me. They violated my HIPAA, talked about all my medical conditions. I mean, it was across. You can go do a search now on the internet for my name. ABC News, Reuters, CBS, all of these news organizations had this and talking about, saying that I had been diagnosed as a dwarf and I was taking illegal antibiotics.
Yeah, I saw that, the way they played it up. Yeah.
It was just incredible stuff.
Yeah.
And so the diagnosis as a dwarf, the blood test that you check for growth hormone deficiency is called pituitary dwarfism, because back in the day, in order to have an ICD-9 code where you're testing blood for growth hormone, that's just what they called it. I'm not diagnosed as
the medical code.
It's an ICD-10 code, ICD-9, ICD-10. It's one of the codes. And so I'm like, are you kidding me?
Yeah.
So I come back, and then my lawyer, who's the employment attorney, when we walk out of there, man, I brought them into an L-shaped ambush. I walk in immediately and file not criminal civil rights yet. I file an EEO where these guys have intentionally withheld exculpatory information to arrest me, and now they violated my HIPAA rights by asking questions that are not job related or consistent with business necessity, because they do not have evidence that I have an inability or an impaired ability that's a direct threat to public safety. And if you don't have direct evidence, then you can't ask me any questions about my health. And so there's nothing about taking hormones in order to be a husband that has anything to do with my ability to do my job. And so whenever they asked the questions, that's what I told them. Well, then they said, well, he lied. What happens first is my lawyer said, hey, listen, they can keep you out of work for perpetuity. They'll keep you until you retire, because they're not going to turn in your admin investigation, because if turn in your admin investigation, then you can sue them. So they'll just keep it open. And I said, the hell you say? No, I am not the target that they want to pick. So in order to force them to close their admin investigation, I went to Senators Leahy and Grassley at the demise of the Bureau, because at that time, the Bureau said, you can't take any personnel matters outside the Bureau. And I was like, hell with you. I'm going to go outside the Bureau, because I'm not going to be subjected to these bully tactics that this organization is trying. I mean, what else are they going to do to me? Put me in jail? They've already done it once. Arrest me? They've already done that too. So I went to Leahy and Grassley and outlined this whole story that I sent to you. And they opened a bipartisan investigation into the FBI, DOJ, and OPM, and passed the FBI Whistleblower Protection Enhancement Act of 2015. And just so you know, because I went there and they did that, opened the investigation, I forced DOJ, OIG to close the investigation, and they closed it by alleging that I lacked candor under oath and fired me again 1 month before the birth of our child. And so I was out of work for 6 months. And so I had to go through a long process. But when I came back, so my lawyer, the person who was so plugged in, he was on the list to be the next FBI director when Comey was selected. And then when Comey got fired, he was on the list to be the FBI director then too. And he opted not to, just because he has a little bit of TDS, I think, but nonetheless, he's probably not gonna like it if he hears that one. But he didn't. But he still could have. And so when I'm sitting there being interviewed by this lady who's in charge of OPR, so basically the IA for the Bureau, she was afraid of him. So I was blessed at that point. So we walked out, and he said, what do you think? And I said, I think I'm effed. And he was like, really? And I said, yeah. I said, I think there's no way they're going to bring me back. And he said, if the Bureau does not bring you back after this travesty, he said, it's not an organization I'll ever be affiliated with again, which really made me appreciate just how much he was behind me. And he was charging $865 an hour, and he was working for free.
Wow.
So,
oh my God. What do you think that bill would have been had you had to pay it?
Oh, it'd have been hundreds of thousands of dollars. I mean, this was 2 years.
That's crazy. These guys literally could have ruined you forever financially.
That's exactly.
That came to fruition on a lark.
That's exactly how they do it too. That's how they do it. It's because had I not been represented by a person who's on the list to be the FBI director, there's no way I would have come back to work. Who gets arrested and goes to jail and comes back and becomes comes back as an agent and then becomes a supervisor? So I ended up becoming an SSA.
Yeah.
But it was much to the chagrin of a lot of people in the Bureau, because they were wanting me gone, because it's a lot easier to not be embarrassed by the situation. So I came back, and when I did come back, that second time they fired me, that said I was lacking candor because I didn't want the Bureau to know I was taking performance-enhancing drugs. So I was like, all right, guys. So I went to Johns Hopkins and got validated and got back on the medication. I went and saw Johns Hopkins, the male hormone replacement expert. Her name is Dr. Dobbs. And I was on the same medication that I was arrested for, except now you're paying for it, as are all of you who are listening, as opposed to me having to pay for it. I then went to the U.S. Anti-Doping Agency and got a therapeutic use exemption to take the medication and compete in the Olympics, the Tour de France, or the UFC. Not like I was going to do that. I was making a point. You're saying I'm taking performance-enhancing drugs. The U.S. Anti-Doping Agency says I'm not. And so, hey guys, if you want to play, I got more games than Milton Bradley. We'll keep this up.
Yeah.
So then I went to the
Exactly.
Department of Labor, who is supposed to handle my medical care as opposed to um, VA. And I got this medical condition accepted as a new condition within the Department of Labor, traumatic brain injury that leads to hypopituitarism. So now people who come after me will be able to take the same medication as me, except now it's being covered by our insurance. And the other thing I
Yep.
did, because I mean, and then the Bureau kept doing something, DOJ just kept doing one thing after another. So I ended up filing 9 EEOs. It's supposed to take 120 days, and they lasted for a decade. I had 9 because they just
Wow.
kept doing more and more things trying to cover their ass. And I was like, so um, I then saw that President Bush was selecting warriors to bring them out and let them ride mountain bikes with on his ranch. And not that I wanted this kind of publicity, but what I wanted was to keep bringing attention to myself and my case, because the FBI was not fidelity, bravery, integrity were just words on a fountain, because they were not demonstrating any of those things. Fortunately, I think they are now. We've got a new crew in, and I'm very pleased with them. But I got selected by President Bush and went out and was the first non-military to be recognized wounded in war on terror. My wife and I went out. Trek bought me a new bike, and the Bureau
Nice.
approved all this because we can't accept gifts more than $20. Now I'm getting all sorts of gifts, and so my friend was the assistant deputy director at the time. Then he becomes the deputy director of the FBI, and he cleared the way for me on that, which is interesting because at one point I couldn't get the Bureau to accept responsibility, and in my house I had I had the deputy director, I had an EAD, an executive assistant director, I had a assistant director in charge of cyber, I had a unit chief on HRT. All these guys are at my house for a party, and my wife is looking across all these people. There's probably 20 FBI people here. They're all senior leaders, and she goes, "Look," my lawyer said, "Look across this. These are the people you have here at our house, and we can't get justice from the FBI. So if we
Yep.
can't get it,
Imagine anyone else.
how can anybody get it?" And I'm just like,
Exactly.
so I kept fighting and fighting and fighting, and then somehow the Bureau was successful in getting all 9 of my EEOs sent to one judge, who combined them all and summarily dismissed them, saying I had no standing.
Shannon, you had no
Yep,
standing.
he said, yeah,
Really?
he said either the statute of limitations had ended, or the Bureau had done nothing wrong, or I had no standing. Just all sorts of things. Instead of like saying, hey, how about the fact that the Bureau fabricated evidence? They then destroyed evidence. They made up things. They lied. They said Barnett has no need for medication, and then they used their medical reference as WebMD. So what are you going to do?
Disgusting.
So then,
Yeah.
so
it's
then,
just, if you're targeted, you're
yeah.
done.
So then that leads to the headache and head injury. So I've had headaches for 20 years. Since this brain injury, I just dealt with it. I didn't seek medication. I didn't go for counseling, because all those things will get you booted out from being a gun toter in the FBI. I just dealt with it. Every time I got fired, every time I'm out of work, I'm not seeking mental health. I'm not seeking medication, because I know it can and will be used against me. So I just said, hey, God built me differently. So I'm like, I'll be able to handle it. So I did. And I just dealt with the headaches. Tinnitus in the ear, my eyes were getting worse. But the head hurt all the time. I'd have sometime migraines where I'm losing, I'm seeing fuzzy things. And it's just like, it was never ending. And I was selected by the Mission Within to go do the psychedelic training where you have Ibogaine and the 5-MeO, and I still had a security clearance. And so I was like, I don't want to do this with the clearance. One of my buddies, he's a former SEAL Team 6 commander, his wife was in charge of the Mission Within. Mission Within was some of the guys who Marcus was working with as well, the vets program, and they're all kind of nicely tied together. And so I was selected. And I just decided I'm not going to go, just because I don't know. I still have a clearance, and I don't want to do something that's going to throw off that. And so my buddy, who's a Red Squadron commander at Dev, he went in my stead, and talked about it. So then my wife saw Sean Ryan show and saw where Sean and his wife went. So my wife initially was not on board with it either, which is one of the other reasons. Had she been on board, when I still had clearance, I'd have gone because I knew I wasn't going to do anything else without clearance. So I wasn't using it as an excuse as much as I was like, it's twofold. It's two reasons. So he went, my wife saw Sean Ryan, and then she said, hey, I think you should go do this. And I said, I think I should. And so my wife found 343, Casey Scudden nonprofit, which you're a part of now, as well as
I'm going through as well.
Ambio. And then Ambio introduced me to Will Treadwell, the Phoenix Fund. And so they handled a large portion of my, because even though I'm retired, I mean, still coming with 10 grand is hard to pay for this trip to Mexico. It's not quite 10 grand, but with your flights and your hotels, and I mean, that's a lot of money. I've got an 11-year-old home. Yeah. My wife doesn't work, and I'm not working right now. I'm just retired. So I went.
Yeah, if anyone's watching right now, I think 343 with their sponsorship, it takes you down to like $5,000 for Ambio, which is typically about $8,300 for a civilian. I think like $7,300 for a first responder. So they're taking about a third of it away.
That's good, and so
it's phenomenal. Yeah.
So I'm thankful for the Phoenix Fund and for 343 for what they did for me. And so then I signed up and I started doing the pre-integration, the pre-journey integration calls. And honestly, I realized I thought I was going to Ambio for the psychedelics to address the brain trauma, which is one of the three things that Ibogaine does, TBI, addiction, and then childhood trauma. And as I start going for 6 months through these integrations, I start realizing that I'm actually going to be going there more for the childhood trauma than I would be for the head injury. But the head injury was what my objective was. So then I got selected and went. I just returned a month ago, so I was there December the 8th. We arrived on the 9th, and we were there through the 15th. Then I flew home, and it was amazing. So I'm willing to answer questions on that as you have them.
Yeah. So please tell us. So you land in San Diego is the way it typically goes. Stay at a hotel that night. Did you guys go out as a group for dinner that night? Just kind of meet each other. Mm-hmm. And how was that? Was everyone kind of standoffish a little bit?
Well, at that point, everybody hadn't started sharing, but it was such a neat environment because, a bunch of dudes, bunch of
hard
first
men,
responders,
men.
And I was initially a little bit reluctant because I was going with a bunch of guys who were being treated for different reasons. I mean, they were being treated for the same reasons that I could have been treated for had I not been able to, extricate myself from the opioids. But a lot of guys were injured firefighters, and a lot of guys were dealing with addictions to not only opioids but heroin, kratom, other SSRIs, and they had a harder way to go than I did. And listening to their pre-journeys, especially as we started getting more integrated with one another, and I started realizing, before you can go to this, you have to detox yourself. And if you're on SSRIs or opioids, that's a hell of a detox. And I was in the meetings with these guys, and I hung up one time and just cried because I'm like, that could have been me if I had not had the goal of coming back to the bureau and getting off this medication. That would have been me. And then to turn around and get arrested and go to jail and being accused of taking drugs, it's just, you can't make this stuff up. So, so we went, and people just really started opening up, and it was such a great group. I'm just so thankful. I'm so thankful that God set that up. As it was before, I'd been going with at Mission Within, I've been going with team guys. I've been going with Navy SEALs and SF dudes, other guys from Tier 1s, from JSOC, and that'd been good too. And I think I'd have been equally blessed. But this was just fantastic. And so as we're there, I'd already realized that I'm going to be dealing with my childhood trauma more so, and I'll tell some of this, than I was going to be just dealing with my brain injury. But I'll tell a portion of the childhood trauma, and then I'll talk about how well this worked for me on my brain.
Yeah, please.
So a couple years ago, I remembered something had happened involving a fisherman at our home where we live in Oregon. And I remembered being isolated with a whole bunch of kids, and I never understood why all these kids were there, but I remember being isolated and then kind of held in this room and kind of being pulled down a hallway, and then I don't remember anything else. A year passes, we move from Oregon to Mississippi, and then I start remembering again. And what I said was, one of my buddies, the team guy, he said he wished that he had gone deep into the rabbit hole with the Ibogaine, with the psychedelic. And so I said, God, I'm willing to go wherever you lead me. So when I was in the psychedelics, obviously it has such a great effect on the traumatic brain injury that I wasn't even realizing how much that was benefiting. So I go from having headaches for 20 years to having no headaches at all. Tinnitus in this left ear is gone. My eyes are bluer. So I come back and my wife is like, wow, your eyes are, and a lady at church was like, wow, I never noticed that you had blue eyes. And so like my eyes are clearer. So that's the benefits of what happened inside my brain with the Ibogaine. And now the nor-Ibogaine is still in my liver, so I'm not drinking alcohol. Matter of fact, I quit a couple months ago. And you want to stay off of that so your Ibogaine still continues to affect the brain. But what I realized is when I was in the journey, I said, hey, I'm going to deal with this, whatever happened to me. And so I did, and I engaged with the medication and learned some things, saw some things, didn't go down the rabbit hole as far as I should have, as far as I could have. I just decided, I learned enough about what had happened and why I looked at things the way I did as a 7-year-old sexually. I understood why that was happening more so than I would have had I not entered into this at all. And then I realized.
So you kind of figured out what had happened to you. You saw this kind of layout before you.
I saw that, and I didn't go as far as I could have, but I realized, what I said earlier. All things work for good for those who love the Lord, and as my wife, she's a physicist with some really sharp folks. DARPA and other places has said that she was exposed to a lot of special operations warriors, and one of the people she met who was a Delta guy was that said all special operations warriors are children of adversity, and I would expect that probably that holds true with a lot of law enforcement and firefighters. And what I realized when we were there, and you and I talked about this, the FBI statistics: 1 in 4 girls are harmed as children, and 1 in 6 boys. And we're there, and there's 8 of us, and 6 of us had childhood trauma. So that was a revelation to me. But what I realized is that this is how God built me. He built me as a protector. He built me someone who saw a lot of violence, growing up within my family that I wasn't able to do anything with. That created someone who. First-generation high school graduate, much less ever go to college, that becomes an FBI agent, catches people who are harming children. I go to war and address people who are trying to, go after Christians and go after Americans. And so, I'm thankful for that. I'm thankful for what God built. I don't want my own son to have to grow up as a child of adversity, so that might mean he doesn't become a warrior. But you know what? God is good, and I feel blessed to understand somewhat of what had happened to me, because I knew from my actions as a 7-year-old that didn't seem normal, especially now that I have an 11-year-old who has been protected and is safe. How differently he looks at things and how non-sexualized he is at 11, and where I was at 7, 8 years old, realizing that something must have happened. And this trip. This journey, this medical journey, allowed me to realize some of that, and I feel not only comfortable enough to talk about it. It doesn't hurt me. Matter of fact, I don't feel. It was years that I couldn't even talk about this FBI stuff because my heart was so broken that I'd been so betrayed by my organization. But even that, I realize, and those are things because God sent me through this. FBI agents or people within the government. Traumatic brain injury can take the medication I'm taking. A lot of other people, I bet you probably 200 or 300 people within the Bureau, I've become the primary person that people call when they get jammed up by the organization. And I realized that, I wrote this in the letter that you saw if you read the one to Comey, is I didn't join the Bureau to become an agent advocate. I joined to go fight the global war on terrorism. But the
Yeah.
Bureau brought me into this and forced me to have to become this this agent advocate and address travesties within my organization that I still love, that I spent 23 productive years of my life, the most productive years of my life with. And so the unfortunate thing was I was arrested at about year 10. So half my career was spent trying to undo what they had done.
Yeah.
Whereas after we were arrested, 10 days later, they dismissed the case. If they had just come back and said, hey guys, we were wrong, what we did was wrong, let us fix this, it would have saved a whole lot of angst and gray hair and other things that probably, but
Ego gets in the way. It's a powerful
and also,
thing.
this is the 1,000-pound gorilla. And when the Bureau does something, you don't fight the FBI, and you sure don't win. So, I'm thankful for how it worked out. I respect the organization, especially now. I mean, we're finally back to doing some good stuff again. So that's that.
Excellent. Now, how was your 5-MeO DMT journey?
So that wasn't as good, and so I was kind of disappointed about that. And so people,
Oh, really?
I didn't launch. And so the way it works, from what I'm told, what is cool though is I flew jets in the Navy, and my guy who was with me, who's an MBO coach, is a former F-14 pilot. His call sign Slider. So you're going to meet him. Hopefully,
Mark,
hopefully
right?
He
Yeah, I'm supposed to. My buddy Wiz, he and I think they flew together. Mark, right? Mark Kelly.
Oh no. Mark Kelly's the senator who's about to get his ass handed to him.
Oh, not Mark Kelly. What am I doing? I'm mixing up names.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Mark
I
was a
pulled that one
14
out. I
guy,
don't know, but
and Slider's a 14 guy. But Slider's the young guy.
Yeah.
So a bunch of dudes who I went to flight school with were RAG instructors for this guy. So it's kind of another crazy small world, but maybe
It
you'll
is.
get to meet Mark. Slider mainly works with the vets crew when they come to.
Okay.
So you're going to work with Dan, who's a great guy, Canadian, another
Oh, yeah?
Canadian. So it's kind of fun.
Yeah, I'm looking forward.
My
to changing
5-MeO,
my
the way
life.
it works is if you think about launching out of this atmosphere and going into space, if you're in an aircraft, back in the day, the F4 could do what's called a zoom climb, and it could push right up to the edge of the atmosphere and then just kind of crest over, and could see on the other side, which is all black, and below is all blue. Well, when you take your 5-MeO, it's all black because you have a mask on. And as you're launching up to that level, you can see where it gets light. And this is the craziest part I'm told that there's 2 times in your life your body produces 5-MeO. It's when you die and when you're born. And so they call it the God drug or something similar to that.
Yeah, God molecule.
Yeah,
Yep.
and I had heard the person before me screaming like a friggin' wild Indian. And it spooked me so much that when you read the book Fearless, you read in there, one of the guys describes me howling like a dog ran over by a car. And that was so traumatic for me to think of myself. I mean, because I want to be I want to be stoic, but I mean, my brain was someplace else. But when I heard this guy yelling like this, he was yelling out of pure enjoyment. But it was terror when I heard it. And when I went up there next, I wish I hadn't heard that, but when I went up there next, I was reluctant. I had no desire. And so I didn't let myself really launch. And then I tried to, because you get 2 times at it, and it's like smoking a crack pipe. So
Yeah, I've done
have
it.
you? Well,
Yeah, I didn't get the disassociation. I don't think I was given enough.
being an FBI agent, taking psychedelics or doing anything that involves a crack pipe was a little bit
Yeah, it looked weird. I'm like, this is a meth pipe,
weird.
man. It's so weird. And it
was
looks like meth.
It looked like a meth pipe.
Oh, yeah.
So they do this, have this little glass tube, and there's like 14 nanograms in it, and they screw it into the bottom, and then they heat it. They put a little finger over the top so that it doesn't escape, and then you breathe out 10 times and exhale, and then you suck in a full inhale, and then you tighten your body, and they count down from 10, and then you launch. And I launched,
Oh, yeah.
but I went right to the edge of the light, but I was probably too much wanting to be in control and didn't let go. But it was I was a little disappointed, but I wasn't disappointed because I got out of the Ibogaine what I went there for. I didn't even know I was going to benefit as much as I did on other aspects. But I mean, my headache is gone. My sleep is
That's
better.
amazing.
I mean, I don't need my reading glasses to read my phone. I mean, I'll still put them on because I'm old. But yeah, I
Really?
mean, I can read my phone
Wow.
now without using my reading glasses, and I can't explain that. I mean,
That's
because that
amazing.
has to do with your eyes. And so I, I,
Yeah.
I was reluctant to even tell people because I don't want people throwing a bullshit flag out and saying, "Oh man, what do you mean tinnitus? It
Oh
doesn't
yeah.
affect whatever." I mean, I still have it in this ear because this is the ear that was damaged with the airplane. You know, when I blew my eardrum up, but I don't
Yep.
have it in this one. And so
It's
whatever,
amazing.
a person can believe it or not.
Yeah, they say it's like a full body reset in
It
some
is.
respects. I mean, I've heard I have sleep apnea and I use a machine, and I've heard I was talking to Angela actually, and she said two cases that she knows of where the guys no longer had to use their machine after Ibogaine, which who the hell would ever associate Ibogaine with, you know, eradicating sleep apnea from someone? But that'd be
Oh yeah.
fantastic if it
Well,
happens.
I told her about this tinnitus, and and I was like, "Hey, I'm kind of reluctant to tell it." And she's like, people have reported that it helps, but I think it's more from the TBI side. But she said she's had people come there specifically for that, and it didn't help. And I'm like, well, I think it depends on how the tinnitus originated. This tinnitus originated from damage to the eardrum. This one originated from head injury. And so,
Right.
I mean, a person could still say, I've been shooting guns and, using chainsaws or whatever my whole life, so I could have equal amount of nerve damage on each ears. But hey, I can only tell you,
Yeah,
my situation.
it's amazing.
Yeah.
And she actually, I was telling you, I thought that you were who she was speaking about because she told me that there was another gentleman that had a headache essentially for 20 years and it was
That was me.
eradicated. That was that was almost
Oh,
a
okay.
year
Well, it wasn't.
ago, and you just went a month
Yeah.
ago, so it was
No,
not
no.
you. So it must have happened
Oh,
numerous
cool. And
times.
that's more anecdotal
Yeah,
evidence, if not, objective evidence.
it really is. It's incredible. So let me ask you this now. You've been through everything you've been through. You had your career, you had to go through the turmoil. You're put before recruits in an FBI academy. What do you tell them as far as their job and what they have to be careful of? Um, what to start doing now in preparation for the things that they're going to see and experience so that they don't, incur damage. Because just because you experience trauma doesn't mean that you're going to have it, essentially like seeped into your psyche where it's going to hurt you down
Sure.
the
Yeah.
line. But so what do you tell these
That's
kids?
that's a good one. I haven't thought much about that, so I have to do some thinking about that as I'm answering the first portion of it. But what I do tell people, and I'm still recruiting. I've been recruiting. What's funny is I recruit, and then people hear the story about what happened to me, and they're like, "Man, why are you wanting people to go to the FBI?" Because I want good men, I want men of God, women of God, I want people of God in the organization because we clearly had too many people who were self-seeking that were looking for their own glory or their own accomplishments as opposed to the betterment of the country. So I want people to come into the FBI. Now, as far as the trauma stuff goes, I put myself in those circumstances. I didn't have to take the crimes against children job. I didn't have to go to Afghanistan. I didn't have to go to a SWAT team or be on violent crime or catch, murderers. I didn't have to do those things. I wanted to do those things, and those are things I was good at.
Yeah.
So I would look at the individuals who are coming in. The one thing I'll say is be physically fit because we were the first class after 9/11, fiscal year, and only 7 of the 50 of us passed our first PT test.
What?
Unacceptable.
Wow.
Unacceptable. I mean, we'd been hiring freezes for 4 years. One of the 7 was a female, and she was a West Pointer, and she's just wonderful. Her name is Sharon. So she and I worked together for the last decade. So she was a helicopter pilot, and so we all matriculated back here to the DC area, and then she and I became supervisors overseeing the surveillance program. And so we came into the bureau on December 30th of 2001, and we walked out together December 30th, 2021. So we did 20 years as
Oh,
agents.
nice.
I had 2 years as a support employee as a forensic examiner, and because the bureau had me on leave without pay for 2 years, they gave me an extra year for just retirement purposes. I don't know how that quite works.
Right.
As it is, I had 23 years bureau and 7 with the Navy, so I retired with 30 years government service. So
Oh,
back to
nice.
your original question. That's probably how I would handle it, but I think most of the people who come to the organization, outside of the initial hirings, when we were attracting computer people back like after 9/11, we were just off on out in left field on who we're hiring. We were bringing in guys with computer backgrounds and language backgrounds and accountants and other people. We weren't attracting as many former law enforcement or former military until my buddy, who was at HRT, started what's called the Tactical Recruiting Program, where they take Tier 1 operators, guys who have a combat MOS, and offer them kind of head of line privileges. You still got to pass everything, but they bring those guys in who are tactical, guys who've been punched in the face, and they can either in 2 years decide to come try out for HRT, which is still a tryout. It's not a guarantee. They can go try out.
As it should be.
Yeah, they can still go try out or not. A lot of guys, are former SEALs and come into the bureau and get stationed in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, and they're like, screw this, man. I don't want to go. I did that. I'm happy to be right here. I'm married, got 3 babies, and so a lot of folks did that. So a lot of guys came in on the TRP program, which is great because they're high-speed dudes who are fighters, and decided not to go to HRT. So,
okay. Yeah, I was telling you, like, when me and my buddy were both going through the hiring process, we were both Atlanta cops at the time, and we walked into that big boardroom for the Phase 2 seminar to tell us what to expect. We looked at each other, and we saw who else was with us. We're like, this is who's going to have our backs. Like, I almost thought, not walking out, but I'm like, bro, this is not impressive. You need some pipe hitters as well as,
some pipe hitters, exactly.
Yeah, you do. It comes down to it, unfortunately. Meatheads are needed. As long as they have a brain in their head, guys like us are needed.
And that's one thing I'd probably talk to people about as well, especially young people, is, marijuana is legal now. And when I came in, you could have smoked 7 times, I think. It might have been 3 times. I can't remember. Now it's unlimited, as long as you tell the truth. But you also can't have done it within the last 3 years. And you cannot have done it if you've ever been in a position of trust, which means, let's say you're a lifeguard and you're smoking weed. Well, now you're in a position of trust. So that questions your judgment. Where it's kind of designed is for people who make bad choices when they're in high school and college. And so a girl I know is a pilot, fantastic. She's one of the best pilots. Her name is Kristen. And she was a professional surfer in San Diego. And she smoked all the time. So when she came in, she told the Bureau the truth. And, she probably done it a couple thousand times. She says every day, from the time I was 14 until I was in college, she decided she wanted to be a pilot when she was in college. And so you can't smoke marijuana and pass the physical. So she quit. And then she finished her college, got all her ratings, became an instructor, got enough flight time, and then came to the Bureau. Now she's just she's one of the best pilots I've ever seen. She had been a fantastic combat pilot. But nonetheless, you can do that. You can't have done anything else. You cannot have done psychedelics, which seems awfully weird to me.
Well, I don't know. I agree with you in that, especially where we sit now. Obviously, as a kid, you're not doing it for the reasons that we're going to, to heal and go deep. But I think the overall attitude is changing. I was speaking to my buddy Wiz Buckley probably 6 to 8 months ago, and he was talking to 2 former Team 6 guys who applied to CIA, and they were honest about psychedelics. They used them to heal. And I'm like, he goes, what do you think happened? I'm like, I guess they're still looking for a job. He's like, nope, they accepted them.
Really?
I said, CIA. He said, absolutely, bro. He's like, I was shocked.
So do you believe this is true? Because I would like for this to be true.
I'm still apprehensive about it. Like, I get calls all the time, and I tell law enforcement guys, I'll tell anyone, keep it to yourself. No one's going to find out. But I tell guys who have security clearances, if you're going to get polygraphed, you probably want to wait. I'll tell law enforcement who are current who are not going to get polygraphed any further. You have nothing to worry about if you don't tell anyone. Just keep it to yourself. But again, if you have a clearance and you're going to be polygraphed in the future, if I was you, I would not do it.
That's exactly. That's what I told my buddy Brian, who was connected to the former Dev commander, who was connected to Mission Within. I was like, look, I'm still looking for jobs, and I might need my clearance, but see, they're not polygraphed. They have TSSCI, but they're not poly. So the Bureau polys, and CIA obviously does. So But here's the nice thing: is I will never use my.
Yeah.
I'll never get another background. I'm done.
Exactly. What I would tell them though is, if you have done them, be honest with them. Don't
You
lie.
have to.
It's better again to be asked forgiveness and
Yeah.
permission.
Well, here's the other thing: is if you are determined to be deceptive, you're never allowed to take another polygraph anyplace else, anything else you want to do, because you've lied. So just tell the truth. And it's like when I was taking phase 1. I went in for phase 1, and the person who's the applicant coordinator said, guys, it's a great job. I love that I've got it. I'm thankful that God put this in my life. And here's the thing: if God wants you to have this job, there's nothing you can do to make it not happen. If He doesn't want you to have this job, there's nothing you can do to make it happen. And having that in mind is how I want to raise. And that's not how I acted in life. It wasn't like I said, Lord, here am I, send me. Isaiah 6:8, maybe, I think. I didn't. I was like, here am I want to go where I want to go. And if I were to make recommendations to anyone, people, especially coming to the Bureau, my son, is, God has a plan. And, we all have certain skills, certain things where God designs us for, and, seek where that is. Seek His plan, because you're a lot more peaceful in life if you're where you're supposed to be than if you fight to be someplace where you're not supposed to be. It's a lot more miserable. And I would make that suggestion, because there's a lot of good people, yourself included, who came along and didn't get in. But I mean, good gracious, if you passed phase 1 and phase 2, you should have been there. And the polygraph, I mean, whatever it was, I'm sure wasn't valid. And if you'd been given a second poly from someone else, quite possibly you'd have had a better rapport with them, and you wouldn't have.
Yeah, I think it is about rapport, because I took Suffolk counties about 2 years after that, and I was so welcomed by the polygrapher that it was just a totally different dynamic. And I cleansed my soul. I'm like, listen, man, I'm telling them anything, and I've never really done anything that crazy, but I'll tell them any and everything. And if they say no, they say no. And I was so comfortable, passed with flying colors, and that was it. So yeah, it is definitely set and setting as well, I believe.
That's perfect. That's what it should be. Yeah.
So, all right, Drew, it's been fantastic speaking to you. If people want to reach out, can they find you on social media?
They can find me on LinkedIn for sure. And you'll see all sorts of pictures and stories and stuff. So Drew Barnett, and then also email drewbarnett@yahoo.com. So feel free to reach me, especially if you have conversations about how the psychedelics worked on the TBI. There's a lot of folks who will talk about it, and I'm not the only resource, but feel free.
Yeah, absolutely. So all the links will be in the bio as well. So again, it's been fantastic talking to you. So appreciate you being on, telling your story, especially about the childhood trauma, because it takes guts. But there's so many men who are watching this right now who are going to identify with it and hopefully raise their hand and get the help they need. So guys, if that's you, please, man, you did nothing wrong. Reach out and, heal yourself, because I promise you it is more than possible. It can be done. You just have to raise your hand and get the help you need. Guys, if you like what you saw, please hit like and subscribe, and we'll see you soon.
Oh, shot fire, officer down, shot fire, officer down. Got a city officer down, shot fire.
223, be advised, we have a visual on enemy paratroopers in grid combat uniforms.
Welcome to the Resilient Warrior Nation, a podcast dedicated to inspiring hope and healing for first responders, military veterans, and anyone facing PTSD and trauma